Hi friends, I'm gonna paint another cardinal painting. This time it's on a 10" by 10" 1.5" deep gallery wrapped canvas. It should be really relaxing and there'll be art tips along the way. Here I'm showing you the Hooker's green that I used. Unbleached titanium. This is phthalo blue green shade. I love this color. And then neutral gray 5. So I mixed the gray and the unbleached titanium with the Hooker's green and the phthalo blue green shade to get those muted green and blue colors on my palette. And that's a 1" flat brush. So this is gonna be a palette knife painting, but you don't have to use a palette knife for the entire painting. And I find it faster and easier to put some paint down with a brush first and then put some palette knife texture on top. So I don't clean up my brush, I'm just grabbing color, making brush strokes. This is gonna be a painting of a cardinal. I don't know if I mentioned that in the beginning. Oh, and I had previously sprayed this canvas with water and then dried it with a hairdryer to tighten it up like a drum. All right, there's the palette knife I'm gonna use. And then I've added some red oxide to my palette and then mixed it with some unbleached titanium and a little bit of neutral gray. So I'm just grabbing some paint. And if you've watched some of my other videos, I've done the sort of horizontal and vertical strokes in the background before. I've done it with brushes, and now I'm showing it with a palette knife. You could use a bigger palette knife if you wanted to. It's up to you. Use the one that you're comfortable with, or try several until you figure out what you like. So I'm just fighting with my I've got an arm that's holding my cell phone to video this. It's an arm attached to a table next to me and I'm moving it a little bit to get it out of the way. So it's mixing a little bit here, a little bit of dark with a little bit of the lighter green while it's wet. Okay, so I have pretty much the bottom half palette knifed, and I've added some palette knife strokes to the sides. Now I'm going to work on the sky area, or the top half. Sorry about that. Just got a notification on my computer. At least it was a nice sound. Oh, see, now I decided that was way too dark, so I took the paint off my knife, grabbed some of the lighter, and just mixed it right there. You don't have to get it right. You don't have to mix colors just right. You can see how they look and then change them. Acrylics dry fast, but not that fast. So I'm kind of thinking, I'm scrubbing there a little bit with the flat part of the palette knife. I'm also thinking a little lighter in the center of the canvas, a little darker in the corners. So here I've used a chalk pastel. I took my reference photo, edited it in Photoshop, printed it out, and then scribbled it on the back of the photo with this red color chalk pastel, taped it to the canvas, and then traced it with a ballpoint pen. And then I'm just showing you the brand of kneaded eraser. I really like these. I think I've mentioned this in almost every one of my videos. So then I lighten up the chalk pastel because it's easier to paint over. You don't have to, but I personally like to lighten up that. It will mix right in with your paint. So now, even though this is a palette knife painting, I'm showing you a little filbert brush because I just painted the eye. I'm going to paint a few more details. Now, I didn't have to do this part. I could have done this part with a palette knife, but I kind of forgot that I'm going to do a palette knife painting. So I started painting with a brush. And then I'm putting blue down because I'm going to have blue colors in the dark black areas and in the shadow areas because I think that's kind of nice. Shadows aren't just black and gray, they have color in them. Being a little putsy here, but that's actually kind of fun for me. Just go slow, take your time, play with the paint. So here I've jumped ahead and you can see I've put down quite a bit of blue for the shadows, and now I'm using Cad Red Light. And then you can see how I put the palette knife down on the edge and pull it towards the middle or the inside of the bird. You could push the paint up to the edge, but you get a ridge. I like better when you lay it down on the edge and then pull it. And I'm just putting in where I think the highlights are going to be. Oh, and you can see on the beak, I used a brush and brushed it in just gray values. Later on, I'll paint that beak with some of the reds. So you can say just grab a little paint, kind of pull it in the direction of the feathers. And here I'm going to use the edge of the knife here, I think, pretty quick. Yeah, right here, to get some of those skinny feathers. So basically I'm just drawing with a palette knife. I love the textures you get with a palette knife, and I like that you can get a skinny edge or you can use the flat part of it. Just shaping the cheek a little. All right, just jumped ahead a little bit because I don't know, you don't need to watch every palette knife stroke. And here, as I've mentioned before in other videos I have, brush stroke or palette knife stroke direction matters. So I'm kind of following the shape of the body and the direction the feathers would be going in. Now I've made a lot of progress here, and the reds are transparent, so I've layered a few, couple layers of the reds over that blue, and it kind of, sorry, I'm trying to think what word I'm looking for. Reds are translucent, that's what I'm looking for. And so you can see the blue underneath it, it looks really nice and soft. Here I'm using a brush on the feet just because it's easier and quicker, even though I'm taking my time with the brush. And there's a little bit of red on the top of his foot, just to tie it in, a little reflective light. Oh, here I'm showing you I'm painting over the beak. With those gray tones I painted underneath, you could almost paint it one color. I didn't. I used some of the Cad Light for the highlight, some of the Cad Red Medium for this part of the beak. And then at the end, I'm not sure if I show you here, but at the end I even use a little Cad Yellow and glaze it over the beak just to warm it up a little bit. You could do this with a palette knife. It would be a little more impressionistic, which would be neat. I find it, like, especially the eye, sometimes it can be kind of hard to paint something so small with a palette knife. Do what works best for you. So I'm just mixing a little bit of color here. With this big 10 by 10 canvas, I can't get my whole palette on the video. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna use a brush too to help make it a little easier to get some of the stripes in his tail feathers. A little later I come back over it with a palette knife to give it the same feel as the rest of the bird. Oh, I'm thinking of it. So here I turned it upside down because it's a little easier just to get next to that dark part of the face with the palette knife. But while I'm thinking of it, I have other palette knife paintings. I think the Three Lemons, if you want to go watch that one on YouTube, if you're not watching this video on YouTube, has a lot of tips. You can see me kind of struggle with the values and talk about it. It's also, Three Lemons are an easy shape if you want a beginning painting to try. It'd be easy to draw, or you could find some lemons and turn them into traceables. If you want to know what I mean about traceables, I have a watercolor video on Bookmarks that shows you how to use a traceable. You can take a photo and turn it into a traceable. I also have them traceables as downloads. They're line art, so you can do art at home. I'll put the link below in the, I guess you call it show notes, in the video notes. We'll put that link down there to the traceables. So here I'm just kind of working out the color and the value. You can see I don't paint fast. I'd rather paint too slow than rush through it. Okay, we're jumping ahead a little bit and I have the cardinal pretty much done. Here I'm showing you the colors I'm going to use for the branch. Red oxide, burnt umber, raw sienna. I don't know if I needed all those colors. And then black and white. I ended up mixing those three colors together to get a brown. You could just use burnt umber. So you can see I'm pulling from the edge. I'm also kind of pulling in the direction of the curve of the branch. And then when it's wet, I add a little white just to mix it, because the top's going to be the highlight area and the bottom will be the darker, to make the branch look round. And it may not look so great. It doesn't look so great here. You just keep adding colors and values of that color, and it'll start to look like a branch. I think palette knife and trees and branches is probably one of the best techniques. So there I've got the skinnier branch first layer done, and now I'm adding color to the bigger branch in front, and I'm also doing it lighter. So usually, I want to say always, but usually the lights come forward and the darks recede. So that's why I'm making the branch that's a little more forward and bigger lighter, so it comes forward. I'm going to put a little color on the side there. I paint the sides of my canvases. So here I'm showing you how the darker color goes on the bottom. So all the little spots and skips you get with a palette knife really makes it look like a branch, I think. So here I decided I didn't like how brown the branch was. So I'm adding a grayer color. Kind of a gray brown. It looks gray on top of the brown, but when you look on the palette, it looks browner. Plus, just adding another sort of color shade will just make it look a little bit more real. So I kind of flatten out the paint and then I scrape it up on the edge. And there I was showing you, didn't give you much chance to look at it, but I was showing you that's pretty much just on the edge of the knife. The bottom of that knife was dirty, so it was a little hard to see. You could stop the video and see if you can see it. Okay, so I pretty much have the branches done. And I'm taking a liner brush, and I'm going to put a little highlight in the eye and a little detail around the outside of the eye. So I'm mixing just a little bit. I don't want straight up white. That was almost a straight up white for the highlight in the eye. Oh, you can see me leaning in to try and see around my camera. See a little bit of my glasses and my nose there. Doesn't that just help the eye a little bit? So now I've got a little bit of paint just on the tip of my palette knife. And I'm painting those little black feathers over the blue. I'm going to leave some of the blue showing through. At the end, I show you a little bit of a close-up. You can see it. Oh, and then you can see on the beak I had painted over, I had glazed over it with a little bit of yellow, cad yellow, maybe a little bit of more of an orange. So to glaze it, I mixed the color with some matte medium. So it doesn't wash out the paint, but it makes it quite transparent. If you use a bunch of water, it may not stick. You want to use matte medium. For glazing, it works way better. Just a bunch of little palette knife strokes for those feathers. There you go. You can even see, even here you can see the blue coming through on that black area around the face and the beak. So this painting I thought looked really nice, but as when you look at it in person as opposed to on this video, the branches were just kind of floating in space. So I decided to add a little darker green indication of leaves, just kind of to weight, add a little more weight and heaviness to the bottom part of the painting. You may have liked it just how it was before I started doing this. So I'm just mixing a little bit. So I'm working in areas and mixing it while it's wet, putting some dark green down, and then I might grab a little lighter green down. You can see I've palette knifed over the underside of those tail feathers. And then instead of using black, I use some really muted blues on that little bit of wing that's showing on the right side of the cardinal. I think sometimes it's nice not just to use black. Just playing more with getting that bottom part of the painting darker and kind of hinting at trees or leaves in the background. And then I flip it so I can get up next to that branch edge a little more easily. Was that an interesting... It's easier to flip it to get against that edge. I'm not sure if that last sentence was actually a sentence. Oh, and you can see I have the feet done. I took a palette knife and added little highlights to the feet. So let me know if this was helpful, if you're interested in palette knife painting. I'm going to sign it here. I made a light green and I'm using a liner brush. I want to say thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out those other palette knife videos. I know I mentioned the 3 lemons. I don't know if I mentioned the pineapple painting and the cactus painting. They're also palette knife videos. You might like those. Let me know what you think of this one. I'm calling it Morning Song, and here I'm going to show you a little closer. Be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and hit that like button. If you're on Facebook, you can also leave me a comment. Thank you. Looking forward to talking with you soon. Bye, guys.